Should we all mentally and perhaps physically just write Notre Dame into the playoff right now? Well, if they go 11-1, the answer is yes. But what if they go 10-2? That's Tyler Wojciak, Locked On Fighting Irish, joining me here. Let's begin with that question, Tyler. What if Notre Dame, say, loses to USC on the road last week of the regular season? Is that a playoff team?
Honestly, no. I mean, I guess theoretically they could get in depending on what happens in the rest of college football. But even as a Notre Dame fan, I don't think they would deserve to be in with 2 losses with this schedule. I don't think that'll happen. But if it does, I just think that the lack of a strength of schedule, the lack of quality wins for this team will come back to bite them. I don't think they would make the playoff in that scenario, and I really wouldn't argue that much against it.
Yeah, I'd have a hard time putting them in. I think if Florida State had been good, then perhaps, but Florida State is what, the worst team in Power 4?
No, no, Purdue. Who would Notre Dame also beat?
Boy, that's
Purdue's
tough.
like a JV high school team.
I mean, and Florida State isn't?
They're bad, but Purdue is a different level.
Purdue's put up 21 points in a game this year more than once, haven't they?
They gave up 66.
Okay, well, I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying we're setting the bar low. But anyway, bringing it back to Notre Dame here. One thing that I've watched with the Irish, and we're going to get into the Army matchup in the second half of this segment, but one thing that makes me feel confident in Notre Dame's ability to end the year 11-1, Tyler, is I feel like they're playing a really strong brand of complementary football. I watch them each week, and I see the offense do good things. I think the defense has been good all year. Yes, that includes the NIU game. I don't think the defense was the problem when they gave up 16 points. Yeah, it's more than you'd maybe like, but guess what? You give up less than 20 points in the Power 4 ranks, you should win the football game every time. I think the offense has really made strides from the early portion of the season. Is that what you have seen as well?
They have, and a big reason why is the quarterback Riley Leonard and the chemistry he has with offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock. It looked like early on in the season they were trying to figure things out. Denbrock was trying to figure out what worked for Riley. Riley was getting used to Mike Denbrock's offense, and really, if you think about the circumstances, it shouldn't be that big of a surprise because Riley Leonard had ankle surgery, 2 ankle surgeries in the offseason, missed all of spring practice, missed a decent chunk of summer workouts in his one and only year with the team and a brand new offensive coordinator. So it's not like he had any prior experience in the system. And it took him a few weeks, but there were some signs that Miami, Ohio game, despite a really ugly start, that he was starting to figure some things out in the passing game, looked better against Louisville. And after that bye week, this team has looked totally different. Starting with that game against Stanford, he's throwing the ball a lot better. We always knew that Riley Leonard was a great runner, and now everything else around him looks better because Riley Leonard and the offensive coordinator are in sync.
Yeah, they have been a dominant team for the last month and a half or so. At this point, you go look at their box scores and you go, wait a minute. They beat Navy really badly. They beat Louisville, who's a solid team. I mean, Louisville lost to Stanford, but guess what? Crazy things happen on the farm. That's just the way. Stanford pulling an upset in the ACC, what was as inevitable as anything in college football. I couldn't come up with one example right there in real time. I'm not going to edit it out because I feel like that's lying to people. But that was always going to take place. But Notre Dame just continues to look really, really good. Riley Leonard has gotten involved running the football. He's Notre Dame's second leading rusher so far this year. People remember that Jaden Daniels a year ago, who Mike Denbrock was the offensive coordinator for, ran for over 1,000 yards. Is that the gear that has been unlocked for this Irish offense?
They've actually been trying to run him less because the quality of competition is a little bit different. But whenever they have to, like when they get in the red zone, that ball is going to 13. He's tucking it, and he's going to score. He has scored 13 rushing touchdowns this season. So it's an asset. They've used that a little bit less, but they've really tried to lean on him as a passer a little bit more in situations that are better suited for him and his skill set. But when he scrambles now, like that's when he's most effective. If a play breaks down, it is really difficult for the defense to try and stop him because he is such a big guy. He's 6'4", 220 plus pounds, and he is very sneaky fast. So when he's out there in the open field, man, it's a tough test for defenses.
Yeah, and it's part of the reason that I liked him coming over from Duke. I know he was coming off the injuries and such, but he looks healthy to me, and he's got a big arm. He's really mobile. He's always felt like a gamer to me. Like he's just going to do whatever is required to win the football game. He'll put his body on the line for better or worse, but so far it's been so good. Real quick, defensively for Notre Dame before we talk about Army, I feel like they've quietly been one of the best defenses in college football this year.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how good they could be if they didn't have the injuries that they've had to deal with all season long. I mean, they lost their top two best edge rushers. They lost a future first round pick, or maybe not first round pick anymore because of this hip injury, and Benjamin Morrison. So they lost their best corner, two of their best edge rushers. Their starting defensive tackle, Howard Cross, who was on some preseason All-American watch list. He's been in and out of the lineup all year. He wasn't playing in this most recent game against Virginia, and it has not mattered at all. They're third in scoring defense. They're first in turnovers gained. They are an elite unit, and they have just been dominant every single week. Even in that Northern Illinois game, the only touchdown they gave up in that game was an 80-yard pass that is quite literally the luckiest play I've ever seen inside Notre Dame Stadium. The quarterback threw it to a different guy. It just so happened the ball goes in between two defenders' arms. There's no one behind him. He catches the ball, goes in for a touchdown. It's the only touchdown they scored that game. And I'm not saying that's the only reason why Notre Dame lost that, but that is what it takes to beat this defense. Absolutely insane luck because no one's doing it with skill right now.
Let's talk about the game against Army this week. It's a big game for Notre Dame, as you and I discussed. Probably an elimination game for Notre Dame in the playoff race here. And it's an elimination game most likely for Army in this spot, but Army has so much to gain. If the Knights can find a way to win this ball game, Tyler, I don't know that it's crazy to say the playoff committee would suddenly look at ranking them ahead of Boise State as the highest ranked Group of 5 conference champion come the end of the season. They'll match up with Tulane in the American Conference Championship game no matter what, but the playoff implications are squarely on this Saturday for Army. How do you see this matchup playing out?
I'm honestly just curious what you think, because the last time you had me on was before the Navy game, and you were like, I want to take them outright. And I was like, go ahead, do it. You're going to lose that one. Yeah. I felt very confident going into that game, and my confidence was justified.
Yeah, I'm scarred. Let's say I'm very scarred from that one. I thought Navy would hang around, but the turnovers, as we mentioned, Notre Dame is very good at doing that. Navy just couldn't overcome, and they made too many mistakes. And I think a hallmark of the service academies typically in the past couple of years when they have good runs, like Air Force last year, Army and Navy this year, is they don't hurt themselves. They run the ball, they play good defense, they protect it, they control the clock. That's the sort of game I think they have to get into. I don't know that Army can go up and down the field on this Notre Dame defense, but coming into this game, I want to be confident in Army's ability to hang around, but Notre Dame is just a wagon to me, Tyler. And with the way it went against Navy, I don't know the Army commits that many mistakes in this football game, but I certainly have a hard time feeling like, oh, Notre Dame's on major upset alert here. I'm going to be watching the game, and there's a world in which Army wins. I think there are a lot more scenarios in which Notre Dame wins and covers.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a lot different than the Navy game. I don't expect Army to make all the mistakes that Navy did. But when I look at this team, I think that game against North Texas was pretty concerning if you're an Army backer in this one, because that offense only put up 14 points in North Texas. The way that Army could beat Notre Dame is if they have their signature 20-play, like 9-minute drives, and they're able to do that a couple times, because
the kind of drive that makes you crazy to play against in EA College Football 25.
Right,
that drive.
Where the offense is just sitting on the sideline, and then maybe they get cold, they get out of rhythm, and they don't score as much. That is going to be what Army tries to do in this game. But I do think that Notre Dame is going to create some turnovers, because the thing about Army, you look at their strength of schedule, it's one of the worst in the entire country. And I think that when you run the option, and everything about the triple option is built on timing and execution, and that becomes a lot different when you go play the schedule that they played all season long, and then you play a team and a defense excuse me, that is as big and as fast and as long as the Notre Dame defense. I think it throws everything off, and I think that's a big reason why Navy was like so shell-shocked early on, because Notre Dame players were getting to the ball much quicker than any other team that they played. I think I think Army will be more prepared to handle that, but I think that over time they're not going to be able to sustain enough offense for them to win this game. Even though they have the #2 scoring defense in the country right now, I do think Notre Dame is going to be able to put up some points in this one. It might be a little close in the third quarter, but I expect the Irish to pull away late.
I think Army has to keep both teams under 24 points. I think that's the ceiling for Army's offense against this Notre Dame defense. So if the Irish get to 28, 30 or so, I think Army will have some real problems there. Tyler Wojciak, locked on Notre Dame fighting Irish. Tyler, appreciate it as always.
Of course, brother.
UNLV is one of those Group of 5 teams that'll be keeping an eye on this Notre Dame Army matchup. And what is it that makes UNLV click? Well, one of their players is going to join me to discuss that and more next.